Welcome to What's a Beautiful Life Anyway? I'm your host, Jill Bennett. This is the channel that shares ideas to help you live your best life, because life can be beautiful if you live consciously. Welcome to this week's edition of What's a Beautiful Life Anyway? I'm your host, and I'm delighted today to have Linda Wood with me. Hi, Linda.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's really, really lovely to have you here. Now, we all know to live our best and most beautiful life, you need to feel calm, confident, and optimistic for life. And Linda, my guest today, is the founder of Linda Wood Coaching and Consulting. She helps people to be calm and confident. She offers coaching, mentoring, facilitation, training courses, online membership of her group, Calm Mind, Vibrant Life. And all of this has a strong emphasis on confidence and resilience, emotional well-being, and the whole mind-body connection. Linda, it's amazing, isn't it, how so many people go through life with all sorts of issues. Tell us a bit more about your journey in life and what led you to set up Calm and Confident.
For sure. Well, I went through the traditional sort of upbringing with all the usual expectations of, school, get your qualifications, go to uni, get your qualifications, get a job, go up through the ranks. And I didn't really have any concept of alternatives to that because it wasn't within my family's typical experience. My parents all worked for other people, and that's what I went on and did. Worked for the public sector predominantly, all of the emergency services at different points, but also in local government a lot of the time. I changed, and my direction of my career changed quite a lot over the time, because I'm somebody that I like to take on new things, and when something becomes very familiar to me, I tend to get a bit bored and restless. I've also always held the belief, wrongly I believe now, but always had the belief that you had to work hard to deserve earning your money. So that was always part of it. Work hard. And if something felt like it was too much fun or easy, then I wasn't working hard enough to deserve the money I was getting. What a fool was I? I should have just gone into something that I loved in the first place, and it wouldn't have mattered so much. So anyway, I went up through the ranks, changing my career, but reaching sort of like senior leadership position, and took on a role that I thought was going to be perfect for me, because it was like the culmination of so many different threads of my past, and I'd have a chance to really shine and use all of my skills, and it would be amazing. And it was for a little while, but actually what I didn't realize was how stressed I had become, and I was actually living with anxiety. I hadn't recognized that I'd actually been carrying anxiety as part of my persona since childhood almost. As soon as I bought into the belief that I had to do well, that I always had to work hard, all of those things, I've been carrying that. And it reached a head, as it does with so many amazing people that I work with and that I talk to. Things just reach that point when life isn't, I hate these words, but serving you anymore. And I was exhausted. I wasn't sleeping properly, wasn't looking after myself properly. I was living away from home to do this job. I was away from home during the week. I had mum guilt about not being at home and looking after my lads. They were having the whale of a time at home with my husband, I have to say. But my side of it was I should be there, and what if something went wrong, all of these things. And on top of that, then, as life tends to do, you just get one thing on top of another. So I had pressure at work. It was a really high profile role, lots of stress and pressure there. This mum guilt, lots of traveling, not looking after myself, working loads of hours. And then my parents, on top of that, needed extra support. My dad was given 3 months to live. And I thought, my goodness, I need to be much more accessible to everybody, and it isn't so great where I am now. So I think around that time, I was menopausal at the same time, so my hormones were all over the place. But I experienced my first ever panic attacks, and although part of my past, I headed up a health education and promotion unit and lots of policy development around health. I used to train people in stress management and healthy lifestyles and all kinds of things like that. I hadn't recognised what a state I was in. So when I had my first ever panic attack, my goodness, that was a wake-up call. And then I realised what it was that everyone was going on about. And when they say I have panic attacks, they didn't just mean a bad case of stress in the moment. It was full on, and it was really frightening.
Yeah.
And I thought at that moment, that's it, out of here. I'm not going to live this way anymore.
Yeah.
It's time to actually start living life on a way that I enjoy. So I quit. I had to work notice, obviously, because you do when you these kind of things, especially in sort of senior positions. You can't just walk out, or some people do, but it's not really wasn't who I was. I'm someone that will always see things to the end, and that all these beliefs that we carry with ourselves that then inform how we live our lives. So I carried it out right to the end, then decided, well, what do I do now? I just knew I didn't want to go anywhere near that kind of world anymore. So that's when I decided to set up my own business, and that's been a bit of an evolution. I didn't know quite how I wanted it to be and what I wanted to do. And I think because of what I've already shared, this thing about, when things get too familiar, I get a bit bored. I think I would always be looking for the next way to develop, the next group of people that I might be able to work with and hopefully impact in a positive way.
Yeah.
So that's my journey, really. So it's been about the last 4.5 years I've been doing what I do. But I came across, because obviously I wasn't in a very good, emotionally fit state to start with, and I started almost trying to recreate the feeling of pressure and stress even in what I was setting up for myself. I had to be working hard all the time.
Yeah. Do you know, that is, as you say, such a thing from childhood, because I sort of had the same thing. As far as my father was concerned, if you wanted to earn money and you wanted to be successful, you had to work really hard. And, I say to my children now, find something you love to do and the money will follow, because you need to be happy to attract good things into your life. And if you're just working all the time for that next promotion or whatever, you often miss out the stage of being happy. And as you say, for a woman, in fact, on the show, I think it was not last week's show, a few weeks ago, there was one of my podcasts, which I had a lady who has got a new course in guilt, because it's such a huge thing for women. It's such a big thing. And with lots of us women who give up a corporate life because we become disenchanted, because the pressure gets too much, we often find that the therapies that we use ourselves to help us get over the sort of burnout will often be the ones that we'll then focus into just to grow our own businesses. So it's fascinating to hear that, there's so many ladies in the last few years I've interviewed on Brooklands Radio, hundreds of them, and they all seem to have done the same thing. They've had this sort of wake up moment with their own health. They've trained in the therapy that's helped them, and then they've gone on to set up their own business. Linda, none of us are born anxious, stressed, depressed, or unhappy. It's a really weird thing, isn't it? I know sometimes emotions and depression and things like that can be inherited. It can be inherited from a relative. But why do some people just seem to end up in this terrible cycle of anxiety and depression and whatever?
Yeah, there's I think different layers of that, different factors involved. And you're saying about the inheritance bit, I think we have tendencies laid down in our genetic blueprint. It doesn't mean that we're definitely going to end up like Auntie Flo, that was the depressed auntie, or whatever. But there might be a bit more of a tendency there, that it's like something that can be switched on or switched off in our DNA, because that's what's happening all the time. We're having different bits of our genetic makeup switched on or switched off in response to our environment, our circumstances, and our predominant thinking, because we create our own chemistry through what's going on in the way that we look after our bodies, but also in our thinking and emotional state. So we've got the what's laid down in our genetic blueprint. Then we've got our own experience in the early years being really, really the formative stage up to the age of 7. So what we experience in those first few years, and also what we experience of others around us, what we see, how other people are behaving around us. So if we had a parent or even parents who are anxiety ridden, depressed, or whatever they might be, and we see how they behave, we won't know that that isn't the norm for everybody else. So we might actually start replicating those kind of behaviors, but also what's going on around us might be triggering our own stress response over and over again. Now, stress response is a really healthy and normal system. It's designed to help us survive in the world, and it should be turned on and it's turned off, just like the genetics. There are things that are useful to us, things that aren't. So it's a unique set of response conditions that then enable us to deal with what's needed, whether we need to, we know the fight and flight and this freeze and things. So, that is absolutely hardwired into our being, and it should come and it should go. The stress comes, we deal with it, or the situation that creates that stress response comes, we deal with it, it goes. But our lifestyle now is much more prone to having all different kinds of stressors, and we think that the stressors are outside of us, right? Because we think it might be the boss at work and his bad mood. It might be that email that's just come in that says urgent, and you think you've got too many things to do. And you're like, oh my God, there's another thing I've got to do before I leave this afternoon. Oh, I'm late for collecting the kids, or whatever it is. And we start pulling. Our body doesn't know, and our brain doesn't know. Well, say our brain doesn't know that we're not under physical attack.
Yeah.
Likely to be harmed in that moment. So we see that email arrive and we go, and, you probably do it yourself. Oh gosh, oh, I've got this. Or even going out the front door and you go, oh, I nearly forgot my keys. And we get that response straight away. And it is a stress response, but we're not coming to any harm. But our brain doesn't know that. So if we then get engaged with that kind of thinking, oh my goodness, and we take it to the next level, the brain is then responding, giving us more and more of that. So if we keep doing that, it's like a habit, and we don't know that we've got options here because we think all these things outside of us are creating our stressful situation. And you mentioned, this journey that people go on of healing themselves and then deciding that's what they're going to share with others. That's certainly what I did, because I, alongside my corporate career, I was always interested in psychology, always interested in the energy of things and the energy of the body, and I suppose spirituality as well, the energy around us, and what creates life, what runs and drives nature, everything like that. So I've always been fascinated by that. So when I was in a really low state and high anxiety state, and probably that far away from complete nervous breakdown or exhaustion at that point, and not acknowledging it in myself, I then turned back to the things that I really found fascinating. So I got more involved looking deeper into hypnosis and NLP and all kinds of other modalities, which have all got their valid place in helping people, let go of things and feel more at ease. But then I came across this particular form of what you'd call it really. It's a psychological approach, but it's based on something called the 3 principles. And without going too deep into that, it basically, for me, what I heard when I heard someone talking about how our thinking and our feeling state and our experience is all created, I realized that I was creating my own anxiety. Sure, stuff was going on that needed a response, but how I was feeling was actually down to me. Now, that gives so much hope. It gives responsibility, but it also gives hope.
Yeah, I think there's John Assaraf, isn't there? And he says that there's he talks about an equation, E+R equals O, and basically there's an event, and your reaction to it will create the outcome. And we all have this fight or flight reaction that we get in our brain, which goes back to when we were being chased by saber-toothed tigers, and we had to, all the energy, all our blood went to our limbs so that we could escape that tiger. But now we need to find a way to manage our response to situations so that we're not constantly getting those hormonal changes in our head. So you're absolutely right. It's how we respond to things, and we don't need to respond. A really good example, and a simple example, is sitting in traffic. If you're on your way somewhere and suddenly you're on the M25, which those of us in the South all know, suddenly you're in a car park on the motorway, and so many people are like, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to be? The fact is, you can't do anything. It's completely out of your control. So for me, I just like, oh, well, I've nearly always got an audio book on in the car anyway, or some nice music. And you just sit and relax and enjoy yourself and don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do. It's completely out of your control. So yeah, being less reactive to life's up and downs is really, really key. So this process that you're talking about, how can we use that to make ourselves less reactive?
I would say, using John Assaraf's one, then it's before the E=R. So an event, something happens, yes, we're going to have a reaction or a response to that, but in between that, we're actually, our brain is making sense of it. We're getting data coming in through all of our senses, and it's all coded differently, and based on all of our past experiences, then our brain is perceiving that, and it's trying to make sense of, and then it's feeding back to us thought in the moment about what that means, which we don't give it a meaning until we felt it. So it's like our thoughts are given us by our brain, which we can't control. And sometimes we might not like our thoughts at all, or we might think, my goodness, where did that come from? I don't even thought that. So our thoughts are presented to us almost like on the conscious side of our brain. Then that is felt in our body. And that's when we give it meaning. Is this something I feel unhappy about? I feel really sad, or I feel this. We can get that full emotional reaction to our thinking without necessarily realizing what thinking is going on. Sometimes, because it's like thought and thinking, thoughts and feelings, it's like two sides of a coin. They can just arrive, they're attached. Then that's the moment, because if something is going on that's just, say something happens right here, right now, and my felt experience is disproportionate and irrelevant, I don't have to go into one about it. If I'm going to get, like, you might say something and I'll think, oh, how very dare she say such a thing like that to me, because it's triggered perhaps something when I felt under attack in the past, and I might respond really, in that moment, angry, whatever. But what I can do instead with this understanding that I have, doesn't always work, because sometimes things just get you, right, and you're just going to react in the moment. But generally, I would then think, oh, I'm feeling, don't say it out loud, but like, I'm starting to feel really quite agitated or irritated by these questions that Jill's asking me. Oh, why is that then? Oh, am I feeling under threat? Am I this? Am I that? No, actually, I'm fine. Let's just see where it goes. Everything's cool here. There's nothing to stress about. And it just lets it go. That feeling just passes on through. And that's what we need to do. Just accept what we're given in terms of our response. And then we can choose, okay, do I need to fight back here? Do I get, change how this interview's going? Am I going to say, right, I've had enough, I'm out of here? Or am I fine with it? Let's see where we go next. So that's what we do. So we're kind of intercepting the bit between E and R by recognizing that felt experience in the moment and accepting the full range. Because it can change, and it does. It's meant to. it's like this the whole time. It might go 60 and stay down there a bit. And then we might think, well, why am I feeling so low or agitated today? Actually, I had a really bad night's sleep last night. I'm generally a bit out of sorts. I'm going to go a bit kinder on myself today. I'm not going to go 100 miles an hour like I would normally. Just ease off the pedal a little bit and just let myself, the whole system readjust, because our bodies and our minds are perfectly able to self-balance if we don't get too involved with it.
Yeah,
With it.
It does take a bit of practice though, doesn't it? You know, and there are lots of processes that can help. I think I became a much calmer person after I started meditating daily. And even my family noticed a huge difference in me. So I think yes, there is that. So it's E+R, because normally an event happens and you do have an immediate reaction. There's a great book actually by Steve Peters called The Chimp Paradox, and that explains a lot about how your brain is working. And he has coached the England cycling team, the England football team. He came and spoke at one of our conferences actually and talked about how the different parts of the brain are working. But we've all got this little chimp in our brain. And if we don't, so we have a computer, a chimp and us. And if you don't get in there quickly before the chimp, that's when you're going to lose it and you're going to have a bad reaction to something. So anyone listening who still finds themselves reacting in a bad way, go and see Linda, or get this book and read that and see how you can deal with it. Linda,
sorry, I was just going to say, when we do get caught up in it and react in the moment, and maybe in a way that we're not proud of, and think, oh, I should have handled that differently, or why did I get so cross, or we can then start beating ourselves up about that emotionally, and then it makes it even worse. And then our brain is starting to build even a stronger case for the next time, rather than putting it into a calmer place. So it's about being compassionate towards yourself, whatever has happened, because you would have been, that's part of being human. You're just being human. But the more that you can accept that and just not make it into a bigger thing than it needs to be after the event. So if I lose my occasion, I mean, I am a very calm person. I've never been someone that's flying off the handle all the time, but I know that I'm, in a much calmer space than I've ever been. But still, I've got two grown lads living with me. They'll do something from time to time, and I'll just go, blah, 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 blah. And they like look at me and think, oh, can't get over yourself, Mum. They don't take it the wrong way. But then, as soon as I've done it, I think, oh, great. So then I could go, oh, I'm a bad mum. I could either go into that, I'm a terrible mother. What am I like? I'll probably or I go, I'm just being human. I'm just going to go and apologise. I was a bit over the top with that, but it did irritate me what you were doing. My reaction was out of proportion with that, and they go, oh, it's cool, Mum. Don't worry, they're fine. But it's about how we respond to it. Ourselves as well.
And recognizing your behavior, which is a key thing, isn't it? I, the same as you, if I fly off the handle over anything with my children who are young adults, I always apologize and just say, oh gosh, I'm so I'm tired, or I'm hungry, or whatever the reason was. But you please don't do that again. It's but I think being an adult and being in touch with yourself really helps you to recognize when you've done something that you could have done differently. Linda, many of us strive to be our best. And I know I had a similar background to you, with a public sector career, got to a very high level, had a team to manage. And all of my time, 30 years in the public sector, I was striving to get promoted, to be the best at work and to look after my team and be the most approachable manager. And I think you get to that stage where possibly you're completely stressed, or things aren't going your way. Maybe you have a terrible boss, but you're just not enjoying what you're doing, or what life's throwing at us. What is there we can do? What is there we can, I mean, with, in yours and my case, we were lucky we got out. But how can we cope with the things that life are throwing at us?
I suppose it's recognizing the situation we're in as well. And what we tend to do is, I mean, our brain, you've probably come across before, once we start noticing things that irritate us, upset us, or, just don't seem right, our reticular activating system in our brain, this particular part, then is on the alert for more things, because our brain likes you to be right, because when we're right, we get a little bit of a sense of justification and validation from that.
Yeah.
But once we're tuned into things that are negative in our lives, we'll start seeing more and more of them, in the same way that we can if we're thinking about buying a particular type of car, and we think if we were fortunate enough, got the funds sloshing around, and we think, oh, it's quite an unusual car and I want it in a specific type of colour, but you don't see many of them around. Once you've noticed exactly that make and model, then you'll be going out and you'll say, oh, there's one. Oh, there's one. There's one.
Yeah.
Because it's being brought to the front of your brain. So the first thing to recognise is that if you're feeling in a low state and you've started to notice that things are not going your way or the way that you would like them to, and it making you feel, your felt response to that is negative, then you're going to start noticing more and more of it, which ain't a great place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And we start to look at the whole thing as being a mess, that everything's going wrong, rather than it's just that person in that whole environment that perhaps the way that they talk to us makes us feel, irritated, or that they're picking on us or criticizing us all the time. So the first thing is try and keep it in proportion and not lump it all together. As I was explaining my story, it was like everything happening. The job wasn't right, the mum guilt, the parents, the this, the commute, the not sleeping. Everything's just overwhelming when we look at it like that. So that's the first thing. But another thing that's useful to recognise is that when we start feeling this sense of being disgruntled or out of sorts and stressed and everything, most of that agitation is caused by the gap between the way that we believe something is and the way that we believe it should be. So we've got a story in our minds that by now I should be like this, and my job should be like that, and everybody should love me, or whatever story we're telling ourselves. But our experience and that felt response to what's going on is telling us that, and then we're agitating that difference. So we can reflect on what's the reality here, keep it in proportion, and then see which bits of it are the ones that are really creating that kind of disgruntlement, that negative experience for ourselves. Focus on one thing at a time, because then we can take the action. So for me, it was that work environment, the pressure created there, that then freed up everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole thing about, the more negative reactions you have to things, the more you're going to attract. I so believe. And I think everyone listening will know someone who's always broke and always talks about how broke they are. So if ever they do get any money, it's gone again on some major bill or something they weren't expecting. We all have someone in our lives who's always ill, and again, they talk about it all the time, and just attract more illness into their lives. So you're absolutely right. We need to focus on the things that are going right in our lives, the things we love, being grateful for everything. And one of the things I do when I journal in the morning is to write out 10 things every day that I'm grateful for. And there's always something to think of, even if it's the fact that you've slept in a comfortable, warm bed, and you've got up to with me, it's a herbal tea or a beautiful cup of coffee or whatever it is, but there's always something to be grateful for. And by doing that, writing out the 10 gratitudes every day is a great way to get yourself into that sort of positive mindset. Believe it or not, Linda, we are running out of time, but I wanted to just briefly mention that foster carers, they have a very particular group of circumstances there, and some very emotional challenges. And I know a friend of mine recently had a brand new baby that she fostered, and of course after 6 months, in fact I think it might have been longer than that, she had to give the baby back because she's a similar age to me, and they considered she was too old to be able to adopt the child. So tell us a little bit, very briefly, about the programs that you run for foster carers.
Yeah, well, it's a fairly new venture, but because I and my family did foster, we fostered for 11 years, and
Wow.
it was earlier this year that I suddenly thought, well, I was absolutely aware of that unique set of conditions and all the different children coming in and out of your lives and the challenges that they experience, how we try and support them so much that the impact it can have on us because we're forever suppressing our own emotional responses.
Yeah.
Sometimes their behavior is extremely challenging, sometimes their stories are heartbreaking, so we get, and other times there's stuff going on that is absolutely wonderful. These kids bring their own energy into your household and their own little bits that kind of enhance your own life. So there's ups and there's downs, but they seem as though it's all under a magnifying glass somehow. It's much more in your face,
Yeah.
and it's non-stop. There's no escape, like it being a parent at all, but you've got parenting with knobs on almost, and everyone wants to know how you're doing it and what you're doing and the records you've got to keep. So there's all these extra conditions around it. So I devised this program that looks in at some of those unique issues that create different felt experiences for foster carers. And I ran a pilot program that ended in July, and I'm just starting the second round of training in that this week. And I do intake calls with anyone that's coming on my main programs, and
Yeah.
really understand for each of the carers that are going to be there, what is it that's particularly going to they're hoping to get out of it, as we would do. And I spoke to one just before this call, and the strap line for the course that I run is called Be the Calm in the Storm. And she
Mm.
said that really spoke to her because she feels as though she's over emotional and she gets very tearful about things. She doesn't react violently. She's not like that end of the emotional spectrum, but things can reduce her to tears very easily. And she judges herself a lot for that. She thinks it doesn't look professional, that she shouldn't do that. She should be able to control herself more. And I said, well, the way that what you might take from this program is perhaps more about allowing and accepting yourself for who you are, and that the
Yeah.
tears are there as a sign of how much you care,
Yeah.
literally do care, and that's a beautiful thing. So it's about forming a different relationship with your felt experience, letting the emotions come, and then not going into that negative cycle. Oh, I shouldn't have been like, how embarrassing, I'm crying again, I'm this, because then that's creating more rather than just letting it. And if you just get a different relationship with that, forgive yourself for being who you are, and just being human in the moment. And,
Yeah.
I've never judged somebody for crying. I think, no, but she did. She judging herself so harshly. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that's going to be one of the biggest gifts that she takes from that. So, but whoever I'm working with, this is the sort of thing that we would explore what's going on in your own reality, because it's all based on the conditioning we've had and the stories we've picked up, the beliefs that we've taken on board, like having to work hard, having to do this, mustn't be like this, got to be like
Mm.
that. All of that, all that thinking that's taking us away from our innate well-being, because we're all perfectly fine inside. It's just our thinking that's taking us away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Now, I know you've got a couple of great offers for the people who are listening today. So tell us about those.
Yeah, one of them is a download. So if you are feeling stressed and experience anxiety, then you might read something there that's a bit different and that can help you. That's a free download. So I think you've got the details there.
I've got all the details. Yeah, I'll post those in the show notes.
Yeah. So feel free, and if there's any questions or anything you want to know after that, do get in touch with me. But also, if anybody is thinking that they would like to explore, for themselves how they could feel better, whatever's going on, because I work with people that want to achieve something in particular,
Mm.
or want to handle themselves in a different way, want to feel different. So if you're somebody that wants to explore whether working with me one-to-one or in a group situation, because I do group coaching from time to time makes it more affordable as well. But if you want to explore any of those options, hop on a call with me. I do a free 30-minute intake call. No pressure. I mean, we might decide, no, it's not for you. You don't want to go ahead, but you might hear something from the discussion that helps you anyway. So, it's win-win again, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. It was very interesting. Thanks, Linda.
Okay.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's show. Check out all the links to the resources mentioned in today's episode and all my freebies in the show notes. See you next time.